Welcome. Great to have you here. This is a unique moment, a moment that unites all of us. We all face anxiety and loss. We all see broken systems. We all experience the impact of the climate crisis. This is a unique moment. This is a turning point if we choose to make it one. This is a moment to reflect, to learn, to share, and to co-create. And I invite you to contribute. I ask you to contribute. I ask you to partner to fix broken systems. I ask you to join the movement so everyone can step into their change-making power. I ask you to nominate the next generation of changemakers. And I ask you to share your wisdom, your knowledge, your expertise. And I ask you to donate to support changemakers. This is our moment to fix the world. This is our moment to contribute. Today is the day, and you are the one.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Sema Kalp. I am the co-director of Ashoka Turkey, and I'm also leading NextNow's network and mapping efforts. I will be your moderator for this session. We are thrilled to have you join the Ashoka Changemakers Summit on Rediscovering Certainty. We are exploring and reflecting on universal truths that we can hold on to at this time of change. We believe certainty is not obsolete, but it's overlooked. And we want to embark together with you all on a journey towards certainty, driven by solutions for this new era. I have three great people from different parts of the world today to rediscover certainty by using the art and science of network effects. Welcome, Faruk Eczacıbaşı, one of our super ASNs from Turkey, who has been supporting our infrastructural efforts on Ashoka's network potential, locally and internationally. Faruk is joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. And welcome, Amine Swanepoel, Ashoka Fellow and the founder of Roots of Health. Amina is joining us from Palawan, Philippines. Welcome, Amina.
Thank you.
And welcome Burak Arıkan, Ashoka Fellow and the founder of Graph Commons, joining us from New York, USA. So this session, the session on the art and science of network effects, it will run for 1 hour, and we will have space for you to participate. How can you contribute to the conversation? Let me introduce Ezgi Barhan, who will be the coordinator for this session. Ezgi'cim, over to you.
Thank you, Istem. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. This is Ezgi from Ashoka Turkey, and I'm connecting from Istanbul. I'm your session coordinator for this session, meaning I will be the person to connect our audience to our panelists and handle the tech side. For this session, please put your comments into the live discussion on the right side of your screen in Swapcard, and be sure that you ask your questions through the questions button in the chat tool. Once Istem opens the floor to me, I will be directing your questions to our panelists. Before we start, as some of you are already doing, please let us know where are you connecting from, and name one network that you are creating or being a part of. So let me check the chat while you are doing it. So we already have Istanbul and Madrid.
By the way, this is one of the first sessions of the day, so people might not have totally waken up. So let's say a good morning to the world again. I know it's what time is it there in Philippines, Amina? I think you're ahead of all of us. And
yes, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay,
so
it's a
I've
good
had
time.
much more caffeine than the rest of you.
Okay. Good morning again to rest of the world.
So Istem, we already have some answers. Mariam is joining from Morocco, and she's the founder of Project SOAR. We have Wolfgang from Austria. We have Switzerland, Istanbul, Lyon, Italy, Berlin, and lots of other answers. So we are connecting from all around the world. Thank you for sharing your answers, and please keep them coming. Back to you, Istam.
Yeah, actually, we also want to know where, what are the networks that our audience is creating. So we would really appreciate if you can also name one network that you're creating or one network that you are a part of as the audience. So you can leave it on the chat as well. And thank you, Ezgi, for this great start. We now understand that we are connected to the rest of the world. That was good. And I would actually like to start by framing the conversation around network effects. I was told by my lovely guests that we need to have a good framing and a good definition of network effects to build on that in this conversation. What do we mean by network effects? As Ashoka, world's leading network of social entrepreneurs and change makers, we have been asking these questions to ourselves and to the very people who are part of our network. I have 3 slides that Ezgi will share, and you will see all of them. And I promise I will be the one talking the least in this session, and I will leave the floor to my guests soon. So let's go back a little bit and remember these good old devices called the fax machines. Remember? We had one in my mom's pharmacy. I remember them. I never used them though. And they are counted as the first ancestors of network effects. The effect grows as the number of fax machine grows. It makes no sense to have the fax machine unless you connect with one another. So it's more about the communication and the relationship than anything else. And this was in the past. From these simple fax machines, we come to present, and we come today, and we have come to sophisticated technologies thanks to telecommunications technology and the internet itself. Our communications are now multi-layered. All of these generate tons of data. Today, network effects are generated by data actually. And now, in today's world, we have huge companies who have cracked the potential of network effects and leading the way and actually claiming citizens' network effects and making huge profits out of that. I can insert some quotes about Social Dilemma, the Netflix documentary here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm leaving it to you to watch that. And the cycle goes as individual. More users leading to more data, which leads to quote-unquote smarter algorithms that ends up in quote-unquote smarter products. Smarter for whom? Smarter for what? Smarter to capture more of our time and attention. And are we happy with that? Is this cycle helpful to lead us to a world where everyone is a change maker? Can we imagine a different future? Our answer to it is yes. So we can move to the future a little bit and imagine the future a little bit. And thank you, Burak, for helping me with both the vision and all these visuals. So the future of network effects can potentially look like what you're seeing right now. Ezgi'cim, we can move to the next slide on the future. Super. So the future can look like this, where citizens are not seen as users of platforms, but participants of movements where the loop is fed to reclaim citizens' power over their own networks. We can stop sharing the screen, and actually I want to see all the guests. Amazing. And we believe this is possible. Reclaiming our network effects, reclaiming the power of our network effects is possible. With this belief, I want to give the stage to Faruk, who is actually one of the people helping us act towards our network effects. Faruk, thank you again for joining us today. And I know it's a special day for you. You are more crowded than ever before with your newborn baby dogs, and welcome to them as well.
I became granddad.
Yeah, granddad. Yeah, so happy for you. And thank you for humanizing all this conversation, since the beginning. So I have this question for you, actually. How do you see the impact of exponential technologies on societies in this age of disruption?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Istam. Well, this is, to give an answer to this question, it would take a couple of days, I suppose. And most of the parts of these answers, probably we don't even know for the time being. I mean, it's everything becomes kind of blurry right now with all these rapid developments, let's say exponential developments. And I think, in my opinion, the birth of internet at the beginning of the 90s is kind of a very, very serious change in the human history, in the human civilization. In the sense of, it's not only the transformation from an industrial age to a post-industrial age. It's something much more. The cuts right now happening are probably more deeper than what happened in the past. And well, with the birth of internet, I think the exponential developments of getting into mutual projects, getting into new arrangements without any sense of geographic limitations or physical limitations, that gave the world the possibility of working much more in common together. So when we are talking about ICT technologies, which means information and communication technologies, I think it's kind of two axes of two dimensions involved. There's a vertical axis which involves AI, artificial intelligence, or computer power, and whatever has to do with information creating technology. It goes deeper and deeper. On the other side, there's a horizontal development, which are the communication technologies, which is, let's say, drones, internet, satellites, the various G4, 5, whatever communication technologies. And if you look at the combinational effect of both of them, it's enormous. It's absolutely enormous. And we are not able to cope to see the effects of it for the time being. On the other hand, it's also growing, of course, exponentially and disruptive. With disruptive, I mean there's a very positive side of being disruptive, which is, your life is getting much more easier, much more comfortable, and even much more cheaper. On the other hand, with all kinds of disruption, there is something dark side involved in it. Look at the social media, what's going on. When the social media appeared, let's say 15 or 20 years ago, everybody was flabbergasted. It was something very special. It was connecting the world, connecting all the students, everybody in a sense of getting to know each other. But in the last 5 to 10 years, you seriously saw the dark side of the social networks. Let's say of Facebook or other networks. you see how, let's say, look at what happened in Myanmar. Facebook is almost embedded in all phones which are sold in Myanmar. And what happened was, in the end, that they were all attacking the Arakans. And there was a huge bloodshed. And probably until people got aware of it, most of the things happened already. The spread was so fast, so intense, until you are able to react, and everything is already happened. And that's not only in the case in Myanmar. This is happening almost everywhere for the time being. So we are not prepared for the disruptions yet. Oh, okay. Let's say we are prepared for the developments. We are enjoying the disruptive changes, but our infrastructure in general is not ready for that. Another example is the blockchain. Let's say Bitcoin or the other cryptocurrencies, there are, serious breakthroughs, serious disruptive products. And it will disrupt, it will probably, didn't yet disrupt the financial world. But when they are becoming more common, you see the effects on in general on finance. But this is, I think, quite a smaller influence, because there's, on the other hand, with blockchain, we are talking about a technology which is targeting directly one of the most important pillars of the legal system, agreement. So the control systems or the gatekeepers of the agreements today, the whole legal world, will be turned upside down. And this will be a huge effect in the future. Not yet. What we see, but the impact of today is really yet small. But it will come, and it will be a hard change. So we have to prepare ourselves for a different world, made legally, educational, economical, financial, or social, or in a democratical way. We need to prepare. We need to make ourselves ready for a seriously network work in the future. So let me break for the time being and go to your next question.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Actually, you made a nice transition to the next question I have for you, and thank you for setting up the conversation. I have one question before moving to Amina. Actually, as our audience, we have Ashoka Fellows, Ashoka staff, and many other change-making organizations in the room who are listening to us right now. And why and how social change organizations like ourselves or like our fellows can think and work in network structures, actually. That's my next question to you, Faruk.
Is that for me? Okay,
yeah.
Fine. Well, first of all, there is a huge grouping of NGOs in Ashoka. And there is a very cumulative knowledge, which is not, in a way, probably everybody is sharing that knowledge, but it needs to be done more systematically, I think. There's an enormous collection of skills for the time, first of all, abilities, and a connection with different resources or different, let's say, governments in one way or another, and connection of different know-hows. And so if Ashoka is able to build them up systematically and make them share, each each of those individual talents or abilities or skills with each other, if they are able to share that, it's not only directed, let's say, probably part of them are working in, let's say, gender issues, and others are working on global warming issues. And I don't think at some point those issues are separated with each other. They have very common points on the where they can work with each other together. So I think a network, a good created network, would be able to take the common know-how or knowledge out of it and transfer it to other networks. And that would be, I think, a big strength for, I mean, I don't need to do everything. I mean, I'm sure Amina would help me a lot with my problems. And I think Burak is able to help Amina a lot with her problems. In one way or another, merging those activities to each other with the potential of the network power would be a very, would have a very strong impact.
Thank you, Faruk. Actually, since yesterday on the summit, we have been talking about intersectionality when it comes to, upcoming problems or the current problems, and what you have been saying about, working together and creating actually intersections with our network power, it will make things even maybe easier for us to arrive and everyone a change maker world. So thank you very much for your comments. And, I want to give the floor to Amina right now, who will actually help us to actually visualize a network mindset organization there in Philippines. And, when Faruk was talking about, creating mutual programs and connecting the dots, etc., we had a prior conversation with Amina. Actually, she registered her organization in the US and also in the Philippines. And it's possible and it's happening. So Amina, I want to give the floor to you, and I want to actually ask you, you are a great example in terms of making use of the potential of the network that you're creating. And can you tell us a bit about your work at Roots of Health so the audience knows a little bit about it? And how are you using a network mindset in your work? And who are your network activators, if I may call them so?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be part of this panel, and networks have been very, very important for my organization, Roots of Health, which works with women and young people in the Philippines to try to reduce unplanned pregnancy, especially teen pregnancy, as well as HIV. And we've been working for 11 years, and definitely the success that we have has been in large part because of the strong networks that we've been able to create. As you mentioned, we plan our work around basically certain activators within networks who can help expand our reach and just make our programs able to reach more people in less time and improve as we go along. So some examples of some of the networks that we've had and how it's helped us. The Philippines has had a long history of not really being very pro reproductive health, or RH. And I live in Palawan, which is quite an isolated rural province. And for many years, for over 16 years, reproductive health advocates were all lobbying the government, the national government, to pass a reproductive health law. And we are part of the Reproductive Health Advocacy Network, which is a network that joins all the reproductive health organizations throughout the Philippines together. And that was a really fantastic network to be part of because it allowed us to advocate and be part of the conversation to try to get the RH bill passed into law. And, I'm sure a lot of the people watching, no matter, what work you've been doing, have experience in how isolating it can be sometimes to be the only person or the only organization working on an issue or a problem. And this network was so helpful to us, just for us to know that we're not alone. We're not the only people trying to solve these problems in our country. And there's other people working on this, and we could be part of a national conversation within our small town, that rural provincial area that I'm currently living in. The work that we're doing in Palawan, our capital, Puerto Princesa, that's where we started. And we initially worked in high schools. So we work in public high schools, and then also provide clinical services to women and young people who wish to avoid unplanned pregnancy or sexually transmitted infections. And one of the important things we did to increase our network was to train groups of people who we called community health advocates and youth advocates. And basically these were and are women and young people who are peer resources within their own communities and their own networks. And they really had a multiplier effect for the messaging that we were giving to students in schools and to the communities we worked in, activating these women in communities and young people from various schools and all walks of life in the city really allowed us to spread our message faster and among more people, and spread the ability to have somebody in each of these networks who is actually knowledgeable about reproductive health and had information. There's so many myths that Filipinos believe. One of them is that jumping up and down after sex prevents pregnancy. This is one of the reasons, this belief is one of the reasons we have a lot of unplanned pregnancies. But, just having those chas and yas be able to, give their networks information coming from us was really very helpful to spread correct information and to make sure that all the wrong beliefs weren't going unchecked. Another important thing that we did with networks is that we started to work outside of our city and worked in municipalities throughout our province of Palawan. And teen pregnancy is really a big problem, especially as you get out of urban areas, go to the more rural places that don't have the same access to services. And so what we did is basically we decided to organize something that we call MITs, or Municipal Implementation Teams, for the RH law. And this was basically creating a network of all of the people who are the decision makers and the gatekeepers for adolescents, for young people, for adolescent sexual and reproductive health. So within a municipality, we gathered the local chief executive, so their mayor. We gathered the primary health officer, people within the Department of Education, within the Department of Social Welfare and Development. We gathered youth leaders and youth council members, government, young people who are in the government. So we had government health center staff. We had basically, we mapped like who are all the people that affect adolescents and affect their ability to protect their health and avoid unplanned pregnancies and STIs. And we gathered these stakeholders together in these municipal implementation teams, and they had never been gathered before to address the issues of teen pregnancy and HIV. So it was very successful for us to be able to, get everyone together and say, look, we have these problems. You're all in different networks, but together you can actually have an impact in your municipality on these problems. So what are you going to do about it? What are the programs you're going to put in place? And how are you going to go about solving these problems? And that has been quite instrumental in getting these municipalities to pass ordinances and just have more programming to support the prevention of unplanned pregnancy and the further spread of HIV. And finally, my last example on this is that before we started doing our work, there were very few places in our province where you could get screened for HIV. We have like a very big, long province, and the only place you could get screened was in Puerto Princesa, in our capital city. And for some people, that's like a 2-day boat ride away. So what we did is we facilitated trainings to get people certified to be screeners for HIV. And traditionally, the people that you would have doing this would be medical technicians, nurses, and doctors. And that was fine. We also trained them. But we recognized that we actually wanted to create a much wider network so that we could be visible to more people, and so more people would be able to access these kinds of services. So we invited community organizers and youth leaders, especially those who were already working with key target populations. We invited them to get trained, to learn how to do the HIV screening. And because of these trainings, we've multiplied exponentially the number of people who have gotten screened for HIV in Palawan. And thus we've been able to connect people who are positive for HIV with antiretroviral therapy so that they can manage their symptoms and basically remain healthy. So our strategy has basically been creating concentric networks of supportive reproductive health people and programs around young people. And we provide information and education to the young people themselves, and then we work with all the other people, the parents, the health workers, the teachers, the government workers, legislators. And through these networks, we've been able to improve the trajectory of reproductive health in our province.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Thank you for this overview, Amina. It's very impressive. Mm-hmm. And actually, everything you said reminds me of our system change module. Ashoka Euro Fellowship Program is offering this module, and there are certain aspects of it, and your examples are a great case for that. So I was also listening with that ear, and at many levels, you have achieved system change, in your territory, and that's very impressive. One more question for you, Amina. Maybe also connecting it to what Faruk was telling us. In all this network activation work that you're doing, and it was very easy for me to visualize, your network activators and, all those meetings and facilitations that you handled. But how are you using data actually to create impact? And maybe not for only roots of health, but for beyond your own work. How are you making use of the data that you are creating?
Sure, that's a great question, and I love data. I'm a data nerd, and I went to public health school, and they really drill down in you in those programs how important it is to have monitoring and evaluation in mind when you are planning programs. And that data and how to use it for impact is actually one of the key important points and strategies that we use with these MITs that I was discussing. We really push the members of the MITs, particularly the legislators who have the ability to write laws and to allocate budgets towards programs, to use data. So to collect data and then to actually look at it and analyze it. Because one of the big problems we have here is that a lot of organizations, including the government and other organizations, don't always collect data. The other problem is they do collect data, but then they don't actually look at it. They don't actually use it to inform their programming. So we really push the MITs to look at the data that they have. When we first start working with them, we actually present them the data of their municipality for teen pregnancy and HIV. And most of the people never even knew. They never knew, how high their teen pregnancy rate was, or what their rate of HIV is, or the fact that both HIV and unplanned pregnancy is disproportionately affecting young people. In the Philippines, 95% of new HIV infections are to people under 35. So, they didn't know these things. So we presented them with data, and every step of the way when we asked them, what programs are you going to do? What are you going to change? What are you going to implement? We always push them to say, okay, what data are you going to collect so that you know if you're making a difference, if this is helping or not. So we have a monitoring and evaluation team that analyzes our own M&E, but that has also been doing trainings for our stakeholder partners in, the basics of M&E. How do you craft a survey? Like, how do you ask questions in the clearest way possible so that you can actually get at the problem that you're trying to solve? And for us, this has been hugely important. We see this as part of our legacy in the province, because we always tell the MITs, the success you have, like that's going to reflect on you. This has nothing to do with Roots of Health. We're just convening you. Every success that you have is going to be a success of your province. And so we just see it as, this is the change that we want to be seeing in the province. And we're actually hopeful that other provinces will take notice of ours, and potentially that we'll be able to train people in other provinces on how we've conducted these MITs, and kind of have like a basic how-to, so that it's not just our province, and so that we can actually have system-wide change and start to really solve this problem in the Philippines.
Super, thank you. And actually, like, besides your work, you are also working on the data literacy and network literacy of your constituents, and it's amazing. Thank you for all the work that you are doing, Amina. And I will have further questions for you, but I want to move to Burak. And before Burak, actually, I want to ask Ezgi if we have any questions or comments from our audience.
Thank you, Istam. Actually, we have a quite passionate audience with us today. They have shared so many networks that they have created and they're a part of. And there are so many questions. I'm sorry if we cannot answer or direct all the questions to our panelists, but please go to Swapcard profiles and connect with the panelists to ask your questions. So one question could be, what is the difference between network and community? Ekaterina asked. And actually, in the chat, Ross has answered it. I want to share a part of it. He says, there isn't a single agreement on the difference between networks, communities, and ecosystems, but often networks are distinguished by their strength of structure and process. Communities are distinguished by their depth of trustful and dynamic relationships. So, Faruk, would you add upon that, or do you think this is accurate, or would you like to say anything?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute, of course. I think it's very accurate, but the point is, well, with the rise of internet, we see much more new virtual communities until, let's say, until the 21st century. We were more bound to our physical communities in one way or another. But with the development of the internet and social media, we started to create new virtual communities, which is kind of creating a new new way of parallel communities on to the usual physical communities until now. But with networks, I mean, there are also connections between the communities, which is very important. Communities are, in a way, if we are talking about communities, they are somehow, in a way, standalone. I mean, they are self-sufficient and dealing. You are usually happy with if you are dealing in your own community. But if you consider that, first of all, I don't believe in standalone anything. I mean, whether it's an institution or it's a group of people or a company or whatever, or one single person. I mean, the information flow, which is happening today, is very much more enough for one single entity, may it be a person, may it be an institution, or it could be also a nation state. I mean, this is why all kinds of different networks are continuously created. So I think the development of those networks, the new structures of the networks make this information flow between those communities much more efficient. And we have to learn how to work on result-oriented projects or events in working beyond single communities. We have to work together and together with different entities. I think it's a simple result. One single communities per se are standalone entities, and with today's information flow, it's not enough to get efficient results.
Thank you, Faruk. Back to you, Islam.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and reflection and all the answers. Please keep them coming on the chat. And if you don't have time today, we will make sure to address them in our maybe learning group that we're going to create. Now I want us to hear Burak, actually. Burak, I came up with your work when I was working as a network activator at Greenpeace more than half a decade ago now. And your work at Graph Commons was very helpful for us at that time to see the invisible connections between all the fossil projects and their financial resources, for example. I remember we were not the only ones using Graph Commons to understand those network relationships better. So actually, my question is, how are you empowering journalists, lawyers, and social organizations, social change organizations through network mapping and network effects?
Thank you, Stem. And it's great to be here with everyone like Faruk, Amina, also Ezgi, friends from Turkey, Istanbul. I'm in New York, as Stem mentioned earlier. I want to start, like before your question, like to briefly refer to your introduction in this session, which is the types of network effects, how they change over time. I think the big problem we have today is the exponential power accumulation caused by what we call surveillance capitalism. And these are like Google's, Facebook's of the world, and the root cause of these problems is the having network effects in the hands of very few, right? And network intelligence, network effects are actually a very interesting innovation, but having those power innovations in the hands of the very few is a very big problem, and that's not the root cause of the problem. And hence the name of the project, or the platform we've been running, called Graph Commons, is about reversing this. Right, it's not something graph, social graph, knowledge graph, like the way Facebook and Google and Amazon call their innovation. We call this not something graph, but Graph Commons. So You get the idea from there. So it's an online platform, a collaborative platform for mapping networks of any kind, analyzing relationships and sharing your findings with your colleagues and teams and communities. And it has, like, over now today 40,000 members around the world who, communities and organizations use it for benefiting from the intelligence of their own networks, their own data, in very different kinds. And there are obviously many different use cases of network intelligence. And for instance, like these tech giants use them to optimize their products, like you mentioned, Steph, earlier. And to, for instance, what does that mean? To really capture even more of your attention into their products. And what does that mean? To really optimize those news feeds, to put you into your echo chambers and bubbles. But another role is possible, and that's what we're working for. And then I'd like to talk about two use cases of this. And the first one is about your question, the advocacy. How can we use networks and network intelligence for advocacy? And like the journalists and lawyers and different social change organizations in Graph Commons, they reveal hidden power structures, hidden relationships that are often like public but not that invisible, or so not that visible, and or covered because they are spread around and they are indirect relationships in their nature. And these organizations, like the nonprofit and journalists, they track those social issues and turn their data into interactive maps about those problems, and which make those the underlying causes visible and discussable by a wider public. One example is a project called Networks of Dispossession, which I'm also personally involved. It's a mapping project that maps the relations of capital and power in Turkey, particularly. And it's a database that contains over 5,000 data points about companies, government institutions, public projects exposing, and their partnerships. In these maps, you can see, for example, this third airport and the new Bosphorus bridge that opened the North Forest of Istanbul to real estate. It's a big, disaster, and we can see from these maps, for instance, like thermal power plants, all of them in Turkey, and then their financiers, who finances them, the banks, and how they destroy ecology hand in hand, And from these maps, you can see mass media owners, like who owns the mass media in Turkey and who makes profits at the same time, those owners, from government infrastructure projects, and often manipulate, as a result, the public opinion in their news, based on how government directs them. So these are like things that you can easily, pinpoint in these maps. Like anyone can do that. And then this is quite popular in Turkey. And whenever a societal crisis erupts, like for instance, a mining disaster, a corruption case, or occurs, or a protest rising in one of these local provinces, you see the number of visitors in these maps increase drastically, because people do not trust the officers, what they say, or the media, what they tell to them. They look for and want to make sense of the information about the underlying facts of these big crises. They're trying to find this out, and in a way, this is how we kind of cope with uncertainty and heal ourselves in the times of crisis. This is just one example this time, and I can give more of those, but I think maybe this can be an answer.
Yeah, actually, that answers my first question. But at the same time, I want to ask you, and you talked about also the individuals, coming and visiting and seeing and actually witnessing those invisible relationships. The relationships are invisible, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. They are there, and they are actually changing many things. And you are helping people to see actually all those relationships. So great work. And the next question, how can organizations as in our audience, for example, how can organizations, social change organizations, tap into the potential of their networks and benefit from their networks in a tangible way? Any maybe success stories, any cases that you can share with us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So, of course, one thing Graph Commons does is a byproduct of mapping and visualizing kind of complex relationships. It enables collaboration around data, and that's not just the Excel sheet. It's connected data. It's linked to one another, and it brings everyone in your community, in your organizations, on the same page about a complex issue. Normally, you will have a partial view of it in your mind, and you can discuss from that point of view. But when you have the big picture in front of you together, you basically be on the same page and discuss it in a more fruitful way, right? And make better decisions.
For example, if we take the data that Amina has in her work and all the network mapping she has done so far, and if we put it on Graph Commons, would we see the things that we haven't seen yet? What I'm just trying to visualize, what can we use it for?
Yeah. So the first thing you do, you discover new opportunities hidden in the network itself. Like, for instance, like the most central actors, the most influencer actors, and why are they influencers? It explains that. And it gives you the context of their being an influencer. It shows you the organic clusters that you wouldn't see otherwise, because these are, again, you are, as human beings, are aware of some of the relationships around you, but not the full extent of it. So it shows you the organic clusters that emerges from the density of relationships between individuals or organizations or concepts. Even you can really map anything, not just agencies, but also concepts too. And it also shows you those who are sitting in between different organic clusters. These are we call them bridges. They are bridging. These are people, for instance, with few connections, but very critical connections, so that they are connecting seemingly separate clusters to each other. They kind of carry information between those communities, for instance. And examples of these, we have many, but for instance, one of them is a recent one, Ashoka Poland office. They used these methodology, mapping networks for mapping the social entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Ukraine. This include people, their organizations, the types of top problems they work on, and the resources they are connected to, and so on. And these graphs, we call them graphs. It's the technical term for networks. Help them to identify, the opinion leaders in Ukraine in social entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? The clusters of organizations around certain issues, and then indirect links between those seemingly disconnected problems that people work on. They were all visible, and they use them in their reports, in their communication, with and also in their strategy for who to talk to first, for instance, decide on these kind of things. Ashoka Nordic is doing a similar work at the moment, which is very exciting. And we also work with different organizations, for instance, who are nonprofits working, who have a certain funding scheme for artists. And they support artists through their projects in different organizations around the world, and those are mapped in a network diagram. And then in the same way, they also show the influencer artists, the concepts that they work on based on their projects, the organizations who are supported through those grants. And this kind of overall, on one hand, helps the organization internally for their grant making schemes and strategy, but for externally to the community around this organization to better understand the network that they've been kind of flourishing over time. And then these all are open, so they become quite transparent on one hand, right, as an organization. At the same time, they become very resourceful. They become the center of a resource center for their own community. And just this is data you can always search, explore, navigate, pinpoint and make analysis all the time from these data points.
And collaborate, right? Different users
and
can
collaborate on them. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Burak. And actually, we are nearing the end of our conversation. And actually, I had one question for Amina, but I want to prioritize audience's questions. Ezgi notified me we have a question from the audience for Amina. Ezgi'cim, can we hear that?
Thank you, Istam. So we have a question that Amina already answered some part of it, but we would love to hear a little more about this one. So Hugo asks, I'm wondering more about the mechanisms of network management you used. After bringing people together and training, raising awareness, how do you keep people informed, motivated, connected, and active?
Thank you. That's a great question. And it is a struggle, to be honest. This is an issue that is, reproductive health is a very important issue for us, and we think it should be for them. And of course, when we're in front of them, they are engaged. But once we leave, as the question alludes to, it can be hard to make sure that they're staying on track. In the Philippines, Facebook is hugely popular. We actually have more Facebook profiles in the country than we have people. And it is provided by many of the communications companies provide it for free on smartphones with their contracts. And so Facebook Messenger and Facebook groups has been the way that we have most easily stayed connected with those stakeholders that we organize. So that's how we do a lot of the follow-up. We have message groups so that they can have chats. So with also for the community health advocates and for the youth advocates, when people have questions or they want to share about a situation that they confronted or have a story to share for best practices, they share it on those chat groups. And then we also, kind of more traditional, we do phone calls and text messages. And pre-COVID, we would go back to those communities every few weeks to follow up with each of the stakeholders, especially the people who have tasks to do, like, have an ordinance to write or who promised that, there was something they were going to do. But since COVID, we've had to rely a lot more on technology to be able to stay connected. So at this point, it's basically chat groups and messaging apps that we're using to remind people of, staying the course and doing the work that they committed to.
Thank you, Amina.
Okay, we are nearing the end of our conversation, and actually there is one more thing I want us to hear, and it is the lessons of rediscovering certainty related to pandemic from Faruk. Faruk, we have very limited time, but we really want to hear those from you as much as possible. What do you think?
There are several. I mean, I'm being in the business community. You see the effect of the pandemic a lot in one way or another, and there are several lessons which are, I think, very important. First of all, I mean, whatever you learned until now. Not whatever, of course, it's a bit too much, but most of the things you learned until now is not valid anymore, this time. And the future becomes so blurry. First of all, you don't know the impacts of the health issues until now. It was emerging, then after a while it stopped. Now it's emerging again. Plus, you don't know the economical effect, nation-wise or globally. And third of all, you don't know the social impacts. And the sector, in fact, impact, you don't know which sectors are going to raise and which sectors are going to diminish. They are all very blurry issues for the time being. But one thing I think which is very important, what we have all learned is there's one single, we are going through a trauma. We are going through a serious trauma right now. And if you are able to focus on a result, then you see how people or communities work and act together, especially the science community is able to act together. Look, FDA has a time range of 10 years from an idea to be developed to coming to until it becomes a product. So now we find the world has several new successful vaccinations in not then in a year time scope, which is a big success. I think in a crisis situations teach you how to work together, how communities work together, and how you come to a conclusion. And I think this is a very serious lesson what you get out of this trauma. On the other hand, from the sustainability point of view, I want to, you need to emphasize that as much as possible. I think somebody at the upper floor, it may be nature, may be God, or maybe some superior
power.
Something power. It said something very important to us. It said, now I'm going to give you a mild case, which is, but if you don't take your lessons out of it, I have much more serious troubles in my backpack. So be aware of that, take out your lessons, and get your act together. I think this is the biggest lesson I took out of this trauma epidemic which we are going to go through today. And thank you. Thank you for making me possible to express myself, Istam. I think these are seriously important issues.
Yeah, thank you. No, actually, the first thing we did as a response to COVID was bringing together our community, back in March at many different levels, at city levels, of course, online, but then at a global level. So what you say is very much resonating. And I believe it's valid for, all our guests and audiences here. So one of the certainties that we had was our communities and, the necessity to act together. So thank you for these remarks, and I can continue this conversation forever with these three amazing names, but we also have other sessions. I know you also want to attend them. So let me express my gratitude to the speakers for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. And thank you to our audience for engaging them with your questions and comments. And thank you, Ezgi, for the flawless coordination. And actually, we want to, if you can write on the chat what stayed with you in this conversation, or any actions that you want to take regarding managing your networks, tapping into your network's intelligence. We would love to hear those. And we want to keep the conversation going. So if you want to support Ashoka's network effect efforts, like Faruk does, please, let's talk. If you know social entrepreneurs like Amina and Burak, and if you want to nominate them as Ashoka Fellows, let's stay in touch. Please let us know. And if you want to be part of our upcoming co-learning community group on, network effects, please write me on Swapcard chat, and I will make sure you are involved in the conversation. And thank you all. And